we receive a lot of feedback about the challenges that is happening with everyone, especially with this distance learning from home, especially for young learners. So hopefully that this session will help everyone manage it better in terms of learning from home, involving young learners, helping the parents, because obviously, you know, they have to be hands-on in terms of assisting their kids at home. And Tim is the head of schools from New Zealand School Jakarta, well experienced in handling young learners, especially preschool age up to primary, which is basically what we want to target this session, because obviously secondary students are more engaged, are more independent in terms of their learner. Just a general house rules, I already posted on the group. So everyone is going to be on mute. And you cannot unmute yourself. If you have any questions or you want to send any comments, feel free to use the chat room, and I will try to filter that. And at the end of the session, during Q&A session, I'm just gonna send those questions to Tim so he can answer it directly. Although the session is gonna be all in English, but feel free to ask questions in Bahasa if you probably easier for you to send that message. But I'm not going to translate the answer. I'm going to translate the question to Tim, but Tim is going to answer in English, and I'm not going to translate it because we're going to lose time for translation. And I think we are here more to the content of this this whole session. So over to you, Tim.
All right, thank you, Ms. Haifa. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank Ask Consulting for allowing me to present today. It's a pleasure to be here with you all and to share some insights. And you know, the things I say are you know, there's so much room for discussion on some of this. So you may have questions, and that's fine. And please do ask them, and we'll try and get back to you with those. So today, first, just about myself. I'm the head of school of New Zealand School Jakarta. Been working in leadership roles in Jakarta for the past 8 years. And right now, obviously, during this time of home learning, it's really a great opportunity for educators, for anyone working in education, to bring your ideas together, share insights, and learn from each other. So this session is about motivation, which is a topic that I'm very passionate about. I've been passionate about this for many years and done a lot of research into it, also from my own experience in the schools I've worked in, and also having various discussions with other professionals in education as well. So this session is about nurturing intrinsic motivation while learning from home. So let's jump straight into it. The areas we're going to explore is motivation and learning, intrinsic against extrinsic motivation, and then I'm going to wrap this into the theory of self-determination theory and look at areas of competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And then during this discussion or exploration, I'll share insights in terms of how you can put that into practice. What does it look like? What could you do with your schools, or how could teachers adapt what they're doing to fulfill this or to support this? So it's important to point out first that in times of uncertainty, stress, and change, we should prioritize well-being. I think that's the most important thing to just put out there immediately, just to make sure that that is always the focus. That's always a priority for schools, for teachers, that well-being should be number one. You know, it's important that we try our best to make sure children feel safe, secure, and happy. effective learning will take place if we can do that. If that's the first thing we can do, that's the most important. And now, how do we look at motivation? So motivation and learning. It might be stating the obvious here, but motivation is important for learning. Motivation is described as a state that energizes, directs, and sustains behavior, leads to more effort, more persistence, in turn leads to high levels of interest, engagement, and ultimately achievement. So yeah, again, stating the obvious, motivation is important for learning. But the key question here is, what makes a child motivated to learn? And understanding motivation is essential. I think it's important for anyone in education to understand the role of motivation and how we can support it, how we can nurture it, how we can encourage it. So first, let's look at extrinsic motivation. So this is where learning depends on reinforcements acting to strengthen or weaken stimulus response bonds. For example, rewards, incentives, punishments. There's more interest in the outcome or the consequence than the actual activity itself. So there are external factors, there are external reasons that motivate a child or a student to respond or to behave or to do a task in a particular way. So you can see here that for punishments, it's obviously they want to avoid punishment or they want to avoid that consequence. The reward is supposed to be a positive a reinforcement. A punishment is supposed to be a negative reinforcement. So now look at intrinsic motivation. It's very different. It's the desire to act, behave, or perform arising from internal drives or for the sake of doing the activity itself. A few examples are personal growth, enjoyment, fulfillment, reaching one's potential, mastery, improving the level of skill. So these are from internal drives. And this is associated with self-esteem, self-actualization, self-determination. And this is the area that I really wanted to focus on. But before I go deep into intrinsic motivation, I think it's important to know the difference. So let's just have a quick comparison of intrinsic and extrinsic. So here are some things that would be for each side. So for intrinsic motivation, you can see it's all from internal drives, added responsibility that they're inspired from, the feeling of accomplishment, pursuit of knowledge, enjoyment, curiosity, again, mastery. So these are the areas that come from inside. Whereas extrinsic motivation is from external factors, getting good grades, cash prizes, getting that new sticker, for adults, the brand new car, don't want to go to jail, for the commission. So these are very external reasons and factors to motivate someone. And you can maybe identify yourself where you fall into these. What motivates you? And maybe it's some of both. Maybe you're motivated by intrinsic things, but also extrinsic things, and that's fine. So, it's good to identify yourself in terms of this continuum of intrinsic and extrinsic. But let's just take a moment to think. Which type of motivation do you prefer to develop in children? Which type of motivation do you prefer to nurture in children? And why? So just take a moment to think. I'll just give 10 seconds for a time to think about that. So when I asked this question to professionals, to teachers, to people working in education, the majority of responses are intrinsic motivation. A lot of people do say that is the type of motivation they would rather nurture or develop. And then there's also a group that say both. They will say intrinsic and extrinsic, and that you need both. That learning is a complex, process, and both of those are needed for children and adults to behave certain ways or to try and reach their potential. Which sounds very, sounds like very common sense. It sounds like a very good response. However, let's look at what the killer of intrinsic motivation is. And this I found very fascinating. The more I researched into motivation, this was something I found was the most fascinating, because I was also under the impression that let's use both, let's use the extrinsic motivation tools that we have and also try and nurture intrinsic motivation. However, one thing that really stood out in my research was that the killer of intrinsic motivation is using extrinsic motivation, which what does that say? So first of all, that means that if a child is expecting rewards, if a child is expecting evaluation, if their choice is restricted, if time is restricted, if they have a feeling of surveillance or the feeling of competition, that although this may motivate a child, the problem is it will decrease, or the studies show that there is a strong chance that it will decrease levels of intrinsic motivation. So if our goal is to nurture intrinsic motivation, it's really important to be aware of this. I'm not trying to say that every extrinsic motivation tool used is a bad one. All I'm saying is we must be aware of the consequences of using too much extrinsic motivation tools. Rewards undermine children's natural interest in activities and also interfere with the cultivation of their ability to value uninteresting but important activities. That's a quote from Ryan and Desi in 1999. And they've conducted research and studies to look into the effects of extrinsic motivation. So a study was conducted to contrast the effects of using rewards. The study found that for activities that children find inherently interesting and enjoyable, using rewards led to a decrease in intrinsic motivation because spontaneous engagement in the activity decreased when the rewards were absent. Just to kind of expand on this study a little bit more, it also found that for activities that children found really boring to begin with, that using rewards did not have a significant impact either way. There wasn't a significant increase or decrease. So I think it's important to understand that as well. But for activities that children found inherently interesting, there was a significant decrease in intrinsic motivation. And again, that's very fascinating and important for educators to understand or to be aware of. So studies have shown that intrinsic motivation can predict enhanced learning, performance, creativity, optimal development, and psychological wellness. And there are significant studies out there that show the benefits of really focusing on intrinsic motivation. So we're going to look into this a bit more and how, what can we do to nurture it? What can we do to support it? Especially right now, where children are at home with their parents and learning remotely, learning from a distance. So let's look into this. A theory that really stood out in terms of a way to increase intrinsic motivation was self-determination theory. So this is where individuals can take control of their own life and take responsibility for their own behavior. Individuals are given more autonomy to make choices. They are active participants in their own learning process. And this can be achieved through intrinsic motivation. So let's look into this again. So a quote here: instructors can foster students' intrinsic motivation to learn by supporting students' psychological needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And these are the three areas I want to focus in on and really home in on the current situation we have now where they're learning from home. So let's look at autonomy. So this refers to a sense that people control their own choices and they can exercise their freedom of choice to proceed in whatever way they see is best. And studies have shown that more autonomy supporting methods can motivate learners to have positive outcomes. And this has led to positive outcomes: creativity, flexible thinking, even better academic performance. Whereas more controlled forms of motivation have been associated with negative outcomes. So let's have a look at what this means. So what are controlling strategies or tasks or methods, and what are autonomy supporting methods, strategies, or activities? So I'm going to put up a few in there and give you a bit of time to look at that, and I'll draw on a few of them. So more controlling methods are things where students are restricted in their levels of choice. The curriculum is rigid. It's mostly driven by textbooks or worksheets, which are quite restricting in some ways. It relies on drilling exercises, memorization of facts, giving them the answers instead of letting them discover it. Sticking to the topic despite interest and engagement, so really not being flexible. Whereas autonomy supporting methods or approaches are where you pose more questions than give answers. Students are allowed to make more choices about their work. Inquiry-based learning really reinforces this, allowing students and children to have opportunities to talk and discuss. More emphasis on the effort and the process, giving them a voice, giving them a sense of ownership of what they're doing. In early years, play-based learning really reinforces this as well. Giving them open-ended questions, allowing them time to respond about themselves or how they would like to proceed in a task. And everything you do, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's at home, whether it's via video call, they all kind of fall on a continuum from controlling to autonomy supporting. And sometimes it could be in the middle, and sometimes it could be more leaning towards autonomy supporting, sometimes in the other direction. And so many factors can go into this in terms of how a student receives it. So here are some tips from learning at home. Allow children to design or plan their own timetable or schedule. This could vary depending on the age of the student and their capabilities, but giving them a sense of control, where they can have a say in designing their timetable or schedule. Maybe they design the order in which they do tasks, or maybe they decide how long they should spend on a specific task, or where in the day should they have their own break and have their playtime. The more that they can be involved in that process really supports the autonomy that they get from it, and ultimately take more responsibility for it. So giving them a choice in their creative output as well. Stop restricting their choices. If you're doing an art project, allow them to have a bit more choice in their layout or their design or the colors they use or the materials they use. The more choice that they have, the more opportunity for them that they have to engage with it. There was a study about a painting activity. And in this painting activity, they had two sets of instructions. For one group, it was more choice, more opportunity for them to decide how to do it. Whereas the other group was restricted, less choice. And the results of this experiment were that there was a lot more enjoyment, more creativity, and generally a better quality of work from the group that was given more choice. Again, a fascinating experiment or study that was done for this idea of providing more autonomy. Ask children for their ideas and solutions. You know, if there's a problem, if they don't have the material that you might have asked for, see if they can come up with a solution for that. What other material can you use to do this task? See what they come up with. Provide that opportunity for them to share ideas and solutions. Of course, I think you should be guiding them if they need it. And again, the levels of guide that you might need to provide varies depending on the child. But if you can guide instead of tell, this is also helping them, get that feeling of autonomy. For early years children, but even lower primary, I think it's important to value play as an important form of learning, because it is. And although parents might not be familiar with, or trained for play-based learning, as a teacher, you should be, giving them the comfort that play is a form of learning, and give them some tools that they could use to support that as well. And finally, personalized instruction and content. This will come up a few times, but personalization is very important, and providing the opportunities for students to have that personal approach to their work, but also how you respond and how you instruct can have an impact on their sense of autonomy. The next thing, or next area, is competence. So this is where a student has the feeling as if they have the knowledge and skills necessary to succeed. And researchers have demonstrated that how students think of their own capacity to learn can influence how motivated they are. And in contrast, if a child believes that he or she does not have the capacity to learn or understand the area of study, that student will not be as academically motivated. So what I found interesting about this was, it's not as important whether the child is competent or not. It's giving them the feeling that they are competent. So how do we do that? So especially while children are at home, these are the areas that I feel we could support and make sure that they have a sense of competence. And that's how we communicate and how we give feedback. When we communicate, it's important that things are clear, expectations are clear, that the child understands what's expected from them. And then when they do something, they are given feedback, positive comments about their work, so that they feel like they're doing the right things, or that they're on the right track, that they're learning and making progress. Making sure that we scaffold our activities so that they're not just diving in the deep end and then struggling. We have to teach them and scaffold those tasks appropriately. But not only scaffold, signposting, meaning making sure that they know what they need to do, because you don't want child kind of building up a feeling of anxiety or not sure that they're doing the right things. And if parents aren't aware of what's happening as well, that could lead to more stress, and you don't want to do that. So providing signposts, providing scaffolding, layering your activities so that, and again, I bring this back to personalization, making sure it's appropriate for the child that you're working with. And you might need to create different groups. You may need to do personal calls. You have to personalize it to make sure that each child understands what they're doing and what they need to do. So providing that support. Self-reflection, making sure children are given opportunities to reflect can also give them a sense that they are making progress, that they're learning, that they're engaging with their learning. They're engaging with the activities that they've just done or that they've done during the day. So self-reflection can be powerful, and it can really support their feeling of competence as well. Emphasis on growth mindset. Really drill down on process rather than results, that effort is really key here, and that, we are building, we are progressing. So growth mindset can really be powerful as well. And collaborative activities. I know this might be more difficult now that we are learning from home, but what can you do to provide collaborative opportunities via group video calls? What can you do together via video call? There are various things you could try, and try different things, see what works. Allowing them opportunities to discuss with their friends or share with their friends what they're doing. that can give them a feeling of competence, because they are validating their work. They're feeling like, oh yes, I'm doing the same thing my friend is doing, and we're doing it together. And this feeling is powerful as well. The last area is relatedness. So a sense of belonging within a community, a connection with other individuals, and a shared purpose. In order for learners to feel a sense of relatedness, it is important for children to feel involved and part of the school community, with regular opportunities to connect with their teacher and friends. Now, this was an area that, that I really thought long and hard about. How do we create a feeling of community when we're forced to be separate? How do we connect when we're in different places? And this is a challenge, but it's something you should really spend more time on and trying to build this within your school, within your class, within, even just within your teachers and within your own departments. This can be really powerful. So let's look into this. So how can you build the feeling of relatedness while learning from home? So here are some ideas. So regular communication, group video calls and regular group video calls is powerful. Making sure that these children have opportunities to interact with each other, interact with the teacher is really powerful. The focus of that shouldn't necessarily be whether they are, completed a task or they're doing that activity that you set. That can be part of it, but the purpose of this should be building that sense of relatedness and community, so that they feel they're part of something, that they feel they're connected and others are in the same boat as them. And when you have these group calls, try and utilize activities where they can collaborate or they can share. So they feel like they are part of that group and that they're not just listening, but they're also actively involved in it. The teacher, knowing all students' interests, hobbies, and life at home can be powerful as well, because the student, when the child knows that the teacher is interested in it, they feel a stronger connection to the teacher. And if the teacher can be, genuinely show interest in this, I think it's really powerful. So that's important. Community events, online community events. This is something that you can do. In my school, we just finished a poetry slam, Zoom poetry slam, and that was powerful because it allowed students from different classes to come together and share poetry. And it was, facilitated. There was a host. We tried to make it like an event that we would do in school, but from their homes and online. And it was a great opportunity. And I feel we're going to try to do more of that so that it builds the sense of community. And also parent involvement. If parents are not involved or not kind of aware of what's happening, this can really build, stress. And we want to reduce as much stress as possible. If I bring it right back to the start of this presentation, well-being was the most important thing, is to focus on well-being. And to do that effectively, you need to have parent involvement. They need to feel like they know what's happening. There's no confusion or frustration. We need to try and lessen the burden on parents as much as possible. But especially for younger kids, they do need to be involved, and we do need to interact and communicate with them effectively. And to go a bit more into that for parent involvement, so how can parents support learner motivation? So one, they can also believe in their children's abilities. So that, kind of influences their sense of competence. They can provide resources for their children to feel connected to others. So that is opportunities to connect via phone or video calls. That will build their sense of relatedness. Providing a stimulating environment at home, allowing them to problem solve and follow through with their initiatives, giving them that sense of autonomy as well. And it's important to realize that parents who are active and involved in their children's education can really help to foster positive feelings about learning. And the only way to do that is for schools, for teachers, to engage with parents and to have regular communication with them so that they do feel like they have a voice as well. Get feedback from parents, listen to their concerns, make sure that you are responding to parents as well, and provide opportunities to get those feedback as well. So having parent involvement can really support motivation at home. So to conclude here, and then I'll kind of wrap this up. One, prioritize well-being. It's really important that we look at the emotional and physical security, safety, and well-being of our children in our schools. And, make sure parents are aware of that as well. Second, and stating the obvious here, but motivation is important for learning. And understanding how we can use motivation to really support our children's learning is key. Using extrinsic motivation can decrease levels of intrinsic motivation. And again, I'm not saying that you should stop it completely, but I do think we need to be aware of this, and we need to understand that it does have this impact. So being aware of it can be powerful, and it can impact the way you plan lessons, the way you give feedback, the way you structure your communication with them. And finally, that educators and parents can nurture intrinsic motivation by fulfilling the needs of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Autonomy, competence, and relatedness. A final quote from Kath Murdoch here, which is, learners are more engaged when they have some control and responsibility over their learning. And it is really powerful to look at ways while they're learning from home to still give them that sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Just to kind of reinforce this as well, with the scaffolding and making sure that they are competent at what or feeling competent at what they're doing. You can look at the zone of proximal development, which was this idea that there's an area that the tasks are set that are not too easy, not too hard, they're just in that right space. And making sure you have that space or that balance is key. And while you're doing that, making sure that they feel involved in the process, that they have some choice in the process and the output can be really powerful. And I think parents can really learn from this as well. So really speak to parents about this and, give them that sense of understanding about how you're going to go about your lessons or about your communication with the children. So that's my presentation for today. It's about motivation and what you can do as teachers or people working in education or as parents to support intrinsic motivation through autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me here today, everyone. I look forward to hearing some of your questions so we can share insights and share expertise. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. It's very interested, and me as a parent as well. Is this distance learning can create a lot of challenges, but I think one key, if I may say, is the collaboration between the school, the parents, how they can support, how can they provide the best learning environment at home. Because I agree with you, the well-being of the students is the most important things. It's not really about achieving results or setting targets to these young learners. Is they will remember how we make them feel in this situation. They're probably not going to be remember what they are learning in those age, but for sure they're going to remember how we treat them in that kind of situation. So I agree with you. I mean, well-being is the most important things, and it's really important for us as educators to make sure that the parents understand, because they probably doesn't really have the exposure to have this kind of situation like all of us. So I think this collaboration between school and parents is also the key for this, you know, how we create this motivation among young learners. And I note some of the questions already, so probably I'm gonna start now. The first question is how to identify the students has enjoyed intrinsic motivation at early age.
How to identify children
If they enjoy this intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you could do this in a few ways. So one is observation, you know, when you're talking to the children and talking to them about their own learning, listen to them, listen to their feedback. I mean, and I'm talking at at young ages, at age 3, at age 4, 5, 6. Listen to their feedback about their own learning. If they're showing enthusiasm for what they did and they want to talk about it, they want to share about it. This is powerful. This is a good, this is a good evidence that they are enjoying and showing interest. And I feel if you do provide choices for children at this age, early years education, there's more chance that they'll find activities that they enjoy doing. And I think if you give them choice, there's more opportunities for children to identify what they like to do. And then as teachers, let's encourage that. Let's give more prompts. Let's give more ideas. Let's expand on that, or expand on their own interests. So I think through communication, so you need to have video calls or phone calls. You need to speak with the children and you need to listen to them. If children are shy and don't want to speak, perhaps see if they can show you their work. Whether it's through photos or through videos or holding up work that they're doing. If they're even shy to do that, then definitely get feedback from parents, because parents can see it, firsthand in front of them, whether they're engaged or enjoying what they're doing at home.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Then the second question is how to develop intrinsic motivation for age 4 to 6 students. I think this is early years and kindergarten students, because sometimes this young age is easier to have extrinsic than intrinsic, because
absolutely
it's so how to develop this?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. For younger kids, there is this tendency to want to rely on extrinsic motivation, whether it's stickers or some sort of privilege that they'll get from it. However, from a very young age, from early years education, this is still appropriate, still relevant, that we can still, the more choice that we give them, the more autonomy that they have over what they're doing, the more likely it is for them to be motivated to do it. And if you can still make them feel good and proud about their work, a sticker isn't necessarily needed for that, but just a sense of accomplishment that they have, and you acknowledging that, valuing it. If they're playing with blocks and they build a tower at the age of 4, this is something that we should acknowledge. Like we should celebrate their success and talk about how they did it. So what problem solving skills did they use? For example, you can try and ask them, okay, how did you do this? How did you do that? Engaging with children at that age is powerful, and they appreciate that kind of engagement with them. So even at a young age, autonomy, competence, and relatedness will still work for that age group. And I'm not saying completely stop extrinsic motivation, because I do understand that we are in a, maybe they've already accustomed to it or they're expecting it in some ways, but I think we don't need to rely on it. I think children at that age are naturally curious. They want to explore their surroundings. They want to play. And if we value play, if we value exploration, if we value discovery and share that appreciation for what they're doing, I feel that will be powerful as well.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Okay, so the next question is, what should the teacher do to provide a good learning material for young learners? What is an appropriate assessment for young learners age 5?
Yeah, good question. So I feel with assessment at this time, I think we should rely more on observation and teacher judgment based on, you know, the conversations we have. So whether it's learning conversations we're having with children, I don't think we need to be caught up in, you know, grading children or anything like that. I think we can do, you know, assessment is, you know, we can do just through conversation and being able to ask students questions about their learning and listen, having learning conversations, even at the ages of 4 and 5. This is powerful, and I think this can be an appropriate form of assessment to see how they're doing, how they're progressing, how their communication skills are progressing. So I don't think we need to be caught up in maybe the more formal types of assessments. We could still have learning conversations. We could still make judgments and observations based on the interactions that we're having, based on you know, videos that are sent in, based on pictures that are sent in. You know, and you mentioned appropriate work. Well, you know, from the New Zealand curriculum, which is what we do at my school, we value play-based learning. And we give lots of suggested ideas of how they could utilize play-based learning. We also do provide activities, you know, that are a bit more structured as well, but they are more optional and they do have elements of choice. And we try and provide as much choice as possible. If a child does not want to do a worksheet, then I don't feel they should be forced to do it, especially at the ages of 4 and 5. So providing the opportunity is fine. You know, if they're doing an activity and this particular worksheet relates to that, and then they could look at it, and if they are, and they want to engage with that, that's fine. I'm not against that, but I do feel we should value the play, the exploration, and the conversations that we have with children.
Okay, I want to probably explore more about this area because, you know, all this new condition and situation, it's really one of the challenges to do assessment. Will you consider parents' involvement as part of the assessment process?
Yes, I mean, yeah, again, it depends on the age of the student, so, and their capabilities and resources that they have at home. You know, for example, you could do an assessment via video call. You know, whether it's a reading assessment, whether it's you know, a writing assessment, these could be done. However, you know, I think we need to understand the purpose of assessment. So there's assessment for learning, which is, you know, getting information that will inform your practice going forward. So it informs your teaching, it informs how you're going to go forward. And then there's assessment of learning, which is looking at evidence of whether they've achieved certain targets or objectives that you've set. And I feel these can still be done through parent involvement as well, for sure. And, you know, whether that's providing instructions for parents or setting up an environment where they could run it and film it. They could send in videos, they could send in photos. We should utilize that for sure. And so, yeah, I think parent involvement is useful, but doesn't necessarily need to be. I think, you know, just observing activities that you're doing at home is also can be assessed. I mean, teachers can assess ongoing the work that's being produced. So I don't necessarily feel it must be these formal times or formal situations. We can informally assess all the time and make positive or feedback and give feedback for next steps.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. The next question, I think this probably relate to most of the teachers and parents. We know that intrinsic motivation is better, but how we can nurture and maintain the intrinsic motivation from digital pleasure? Especially in learning from home situation, kids are choosing to play game and watching YouTube better than learning. Is it really possible to give autonomy for kids with no discipline habit and to plan their own time for learning? If it is, what tips are there?
It's a good point. And I will bring it back to what I said before. And it does fall on a continuum between autonomy and control. So even at a school that wants to provide as much autonomy supporting methods as possible, you still do have some elements of control in there, whether it's the timetable, whether it's the bell that sounds that it's lunchtime, whether it's the rules of the classroom, whether it's the guidelines they have to follow. There are some elements of control there, but I guess it's trying to figure out where on that continuum can you fall. And even when you're learning from home, you can provide elements of choice and autonomy on how they structure their day, even with some boundaries as well. So for example, you have the tasks from the teachers. Let's say there's 3 different tasks that a child needs to do, or activities that they need to do. The boundaries are going to be that these are the 3 tasks, that these are the 3 tasks that they may have to do. The autonomy side of it comes into maybe how they arrange that. Maybe they plan it in particular ways. Maybe they put this thing first, that second, and that third. Maybe they decide I'm gonna give 20 minutes to this, or I'm gonna give 40 minutes to this. Providing elements of choice and autonomy can be very powerful. For sure, you need to set some boundaries like we do at school. You need to set them at home as well. So what websites you can go on, what materials you could use, for example. These are boundaries that we can set, and I think we should set. And speak to children about why you're setting them as well, so that they understand the purpose of it. If they're going to use the computer for a particular activity, maybe it's to do that particular task. It's not a time where they can just randomly find YouTube and watch something that they want to do. But perhaps you can include that into the day plan. That, okay, what time are you going to watch YouTube? So again, I think it's important to also allow children to discuss when their playtime should be, or when their YouTube time should be, and have that conversation with them and see what they come up with as well. I think you'll be surprised what children respond with if we guide them correctly and give them the opportunities to discuss.
Or maybe, if I may add, Tim, sometimes this digital pleasure, we can actually use that as one of the resources, because I think for young learners, we need to be creative as well. If it's all, reading books, worksheets, or probably something that is really routines and same all over again, with all this condition that we don't know how it will end and when, it probably is good to actually use that, if I may say. And probably some of the games, it's even educational games, that it can relate to probably the timetable or time plan or week plan that was dedicated for the students. What do you think, Tim?
Oh, 100%. I think utilize technology. Yeah, as I said, definitely set boundaries. So if they're going to use their laptop for a particular task, then they should be aware of that they're using it for this task, so that they utilize good online resources, whether it's A to Z learning, or whether it's Starfall, or whatever it is, whatever online resource you may have. There are some great ones, and I think you should utilize them for sure. Teachers should also select a few that are purposeful and meaningful, because there are so many out there that can be quite overwhelming. So, selecting a few that are really good will be helpful for parents as well, because I'm sure everyone right now is getting overwhelmed with the amount of online resources. So being able to have a select few that are really good is going to be helpful. And I think including that into your day plan, into your list of activities that you can work on is crucial and will be good for sure.
Thank you. I think you mentioned about setting up boundaries. So this is one of the questions: how to set up boundaries toward the choice given to the students, because it might be that every choice is different among each student.
Yeah, absolutely. Every child is different, and we should be aware of that. And we do need to cater, how we communicate, how we set tasks to our students. So I always try and make sure that, you know, personalization is key here. We have personalized approaches to this, and that will be different for every child. Having said that, I think you'll be surprised with what children may decide and what choices they make. I think giving them the opportunities to choose is powerful. And if they make a wrong choice, this is a teachable moment, and we can, you know, use that as an opportunity for them to learn and discuss why wasn't it appropriate to do that, you know, or maybe the misuse of material, or some, you know, they did something they shouldn't have. And I think, you know, setting boundaries is obviously important, and that doesn't mean that we should restrict or you know, not give them choice. It just means that where on that continuum do we fall? For some children, it may need to be a bit more towards controlling, or maybe, you know, to start with, have a bit more control, and then try and loosen that a bit more as they understand the boundaries more. So definitely there needs to be some flexibility there. But I think, you know, even when they make a mistake, you can still frame your communication with them about how they're going to act next as if it's their choice, and that's powerful. For example, you know, if you tell a child, you know, you have the power to do this or to do this, and most of the time they're going to pick the right thing to do, and I think you should give them more credit for that, you know, in terms of trusting that they will make that decision. And if they don't, again, a teachable moment that we can have with them.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Could you share any apps or LMS for teachers to give materials and share it to students, especially for young learners, so the students and teachers will communicate through it as a daily activities, and parents are also involved? So probably you can share your experience on how you use your apps or platform to support your daily learnings.
Oh, okay, yeah. So again, very much depends on the age and capabilities of, you know, of the children. There are many apps that you could use. I don't get too caught up in making sure that the app is the right thing. I think the most important is the engagement that the teacher has with the children. So, you know, whether they share that as a PDF document, but again, very clearly communicated, or whether it's on an app like Seesaw. I think the most important thing is how you communicate it in terms of the language you're using, how clear it is, what the, you know, kind of expectations might be, making sure that it is scaffolded so it's appropriate for the child. I think that is a lot more important than necessarily the app that you're using. I think apps are, you know, are good tools that we can use to structure and communicate with families. You know, whether it's Google Classroom for maybe the older children, whether it's Seesaw for the younger children. I think there are many apps out there, but I think more importantly than whatever app you are using, it's just how you frame it and how you structure it so that it's clear, that it's purposeful, that it's fun, it's engaging, and they can engage with the tasks and the activities.
Okay, thanks, Tim. I think one of the question is also asking about Zoom. Do you use that in your part of your tools for this home learning?
Yeah. So even for even for younger children, we use Zoom video calls for storytelling, for circle time, for opportunities to share and talk. You know, children get quite excited to see their friends, and, you know, even at 3-4 years old, we don't feel that too much screen time is going to be beneficial. Children need to play. They need to be hands-on. Just looking at a screen and listening to a teacher might not, you know, work for every child. So definitely have the element of choice in there. If a child does not want to sit down and listen for 30 minutes to a teacher, that's okay. I don't think they should be forced to do that. Provide opportunities where they can see their friends on video screen. They love that and they really enjoy that opportunity. If they also given an opportunity to speak as well, that's great. So, you know, find opportunities that they can do that. You know, whether it's you know, having some sort of dialogue, whether they show a toy to the rest of their class and they can talk about it. The purpose of that, again, is to build relatedness so that they feel like they're part of something, that they feel they're connected with their teacher and friends. So any opportunity to use video calls, whether it's Zoom or other means, I think should be utilized at this time. But definitely be aware of the time, you know, that a kid is looking at the screen. You don't want to overdo that. You don't want to make it too reliant on video screen time. But if you can structure it within your day, I think it can be very powerful.
Okay, thanks. One last question: is personalization and differentiation the same?
Well, so if you're differentiating something, then, you know, in a classroom or at home, then you're making sure the level of work is appropriate to the child. To personalize it, you know, that's a bit more broader, because you're also giving opportunities for them to use their own interests, perhaps make it more personal as well to their situation and their life, make it more authentic, make it more purposeful for them. So there is a slight difference for sure, but ultimately the idea is that it is purposeful for that particular child. Whether it's the instruction that you give, whether it's the content that you give, the feedback that you give, I think it needs to be relevant to the child.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Some of the questions is basically you answered in previous questions and a bit similar, but probably I want to put it forward, this extrinsic and intrinsic. That sometimes we know what's best, but sometimes we need to have that extrinsic one, and how we move it to have that intrinsic motivation. So how you can phase that out, because sometimes it's easier for us to say, but it's can be challenging in terms of implementation. So probably this one wrap-up session about extrinsic and intrinsic.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and yeah, we did discuss that earlier about, you know, where is the balance of doing this, and how do you move more towards intrinsic motivation? And my take on that is that if children enjoy learning, and if you can kind of create an environment where learning is enjoyable and they can engage with that, and I feel if you can do that via autonomy, via competence, and via relatedness, if you can build that sense of developing interest in learning, then extrinsic motivation is less needed anyway, because they will be motivated. So I feel if we do focus on those three things and we really support and nurture that, then you won't necessarily need the extrinsic motivation, because they will already be motivated. I understand that they might already have certain expectations that if they do this, they're going to get this. So I don't necessarily, you know, I'm not suggesting that you completely stop it, but I do feel that if you focus on those things that I presented, you will see a difference in levels of motivation, of intrinsic motivation. And if levels of intrinsic motivation are increasing, then you don't need to rely on the extrinsic motivation.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Fantastic session. I'm sure everyone have a lot of takeaways, and hopefully helping everyone, especially teachers, for young learners, to provide more creative, more collaborative learning experience for the kids. And I just want to say also, for teachers, you know, try to engage the parents as much as you can, because it's also a challenge for them. They need as much as support as you guys need to support. So basically, they are now in a position to take some of your roles in the school. So try to empathize with a lot of challenges they're facing as well. As always, we wanna get your feedback on the sessions for us to be able to provide more session that is useful for you. So the link is going to be shared in the group. So please just take 1 or 2 minutes to fill out the form. And we're going to share the link of the recording session of this session. Again, thank you. Thanks, Tim, for your time.
Thank you.
If anyone have any more questions, you can address in the group, and I will try to push it to Tim for answers. Have a nice day for the rest of the day. Keep semangat, because it's really challenging times, really difficult times, but we will get through this. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.